Welcome to the Lexy Show, Fashion That Gives a Damn, where we expose fast fashion and celebrate the brands and products actually making a difference for our planet. I'm Lexi Silverstein, and today I am talking with Juliet Seeger-Banks, founder of Human Touch, a Berlin-based fashion brand that uses a unique paint sewing technique to make the human labor behind garment production visible and celebrated through its distinctive handcrafted pieces. If you're new here, head to lexisilverstein.com for information on sustainable fashion and eco-conscious living. And if you love what you hear, subscribe and share this episode. It helps more than you think. Juliet, welcome. So the name Human Touch is very intentional. How did you land on it, and what did you want to communicate from day one?
The name actually came up rather than like strategically going for what could sound cool or what could sound like appropriate. It just really came up in a conversation when I was brainstorming about the project and the idea of the paint sewing, and just like popped up to be like, yeah, it could just to show the human touch of garment manufacturing. And so at first it was more like a project title just to have something to put on the name, to put on the work, but then it stuck and made itself. Yeah, and I think also because our Human Touch as a brand wasn't set out to be a brand from the beginning.
Oh,
It was
really?
an experiment. And yeah, it just gradually grew, and the Human Touch as a title stuck with it over the years.
Tell us about that. How has Human Touch evolved from this, experiment to a brand?
I came up with the idea of paint sewing in 2020 when I was doing a master's degree in sustainable design.
Mm.
But because I'm a trained tailor and a clothing engineer, I've always had the focus of the focus for my projects were always on fashion, and especially around garment manufacturing. And so at the time, I was very curious about the state of automation in the garment industry. And I was, again, being a trained tailor, I was curious, like, does it mean if a robot would sew a whole garment? Like, how does it actually work in contrast to doing it with my hands? And so I researched in that field and realized pretty quickly that even though you can automate part of the process, we're still super far away from actually automating the full process of garment manufacturing. And to
Mhm.
me, that was such a, even as a trained professional, basically, it was still like a wow moment to really have to be confronted with those hard facts. And so to visualize that, I thought of this paint sewing technique where I cover my hands with paint to print the fingerprints onto the garment during the sewing process. And yeah, in the beginning, it was really just for my university in that environment. And then I started putting that on social media, on my personal Instagram account, and somehow people started reacting to it. And then people started asking me questions. And then I had some exhibitions, again, like in this sort of college context. I realized that people were actually genuinely interested in this way of visualizing it. Yeah, so that's where it started a few years ago. And then in 2023, I partnered with my friend and now business partner, Christina, to take this little project with a couple of made to order pieces and turn it into an actual fashion brand with collections and, yeah, products you can buy and products you can wear, especially.
That is so incredible and so important. I often mention how I think there's a misconception out there that people think our clothes are made by robots and
Yeah.
and then all of our clothes, whether it's like a fast fashion brand or a sustainable brand, there is a human element to this. There are garment workers who are basically the entire fashion industry is riding on these amazing garment workers, and it's oftentimes those garment workers who unfortunately are working in horrible conditions or not getting paid correctly, and some so many more unfortunate realities to the fashion industry. And so I think that it's just so amazing and important to remind people, and this is such a
Yeah.
great way of going about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, there's this term handmade, and I feel like there's a bit of a misconception around that because essentially next to every garment that we wear is handmade. some to a higher degree than others. And it's not so much that the technology behind it is different, it's the system behind it that's different. If something is handmade on your sewing machine at home, it uses the same technology that the sewing machine in a garment manufacturer, like in a garment factory in Bangladesh, uses. And it's just that the scale of it is different.
Yeah, no, completely. That is so much of, I feel like, what's out there and everything is just like marketing and how we label things. And I remember when it was like vegan leather, like that was a very large term to use. And then it was really greenwashing, like,
Yeah.
because vegan leather is just a lot of plastic
Yeah, what's
and
like polyurethane and that kind of stuff.
yeah. And so we're going around saying it's handmade and that's great if it is handmade and that's whatever.
Yeah.
But like you said, a lot of these are handmade anyways in one aspect or another. So
Yeah.
definitely a good shout out. During Berlin Fashion Week, Human Touch opened its studio to the public, inviting people inside to see the collection, shop, an in-studio sale, and experience the paint sewing technique up close. Why is it important for you to create that kind of intimate physical experience during such a high-profile week?
Because our brand is built on literally showing the manufacturing process, I
Mhm.
think that's why we have a higher emphasis on not just showing the finished product that you would see, for example, in a runway show or in a showroom presentation, but also showcasing the machines we use, the space we're in, like the reality of how these things came to be. And I think for a while we were almost a little bit shy about our work environment. We start with a fashion brand in this world where there's like lots of glitz and it's glossy and nice and chic and but the reality is if you start a fashion brand, if you're a designer, you sometimes cut the stuff on your floor at home or like you have to develop, you're not immediately in a nice office space. But now I think we've come to a point that we're actually like really proud of of showing exactly where we work and engaging with people about why we made certain decisions, why actually talking to people about the structure of our business rather than hiding it away. Yeah, that was one component of why we decided to do the studio visit this time. And then the other component is just like whenever you create a fashion week event, for us it always starts with the location and searching the location and securing it and actually like paying for a location that you
Mhm.
rent for some time. That's a lot of effort and can be lots of fun and curating a new space. In my case, because I just had a baby a few months ago, it was also let's calm things down a little bit, let's work with what we have. And yeah, but it was really nice. It was an actually genuinely lovely day.
Oh, congratulations on your
Thank
baby.
you.
Wow, you are amazing. Brand owner, Berlin Fashion Week, mother.
Thank you.
What can't the woman do? So, what did you hope when opening your studio up during Fashion Week? Do you think maybe it changed the way that people understand the value of the work?
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a different mix of people who came. We had some people who knew the brand and who knew our work and already were like, yes, we fully get it and are aligned or whatever. And for them, it just was interesting to see behind the scenes. And then we had other people who had never heard of us, who had just seen it on the Fashion Week calendar and were like, sounds interesting, let's go see. And they got to know the concept from the beginning. We've in the past also had like pop-ups and pop-up performances where we would do the paint sewing in different spaces that were not our studio. And then and also now, you still sometimes have this moment where you can see like the people, they watch the paint sewing happening. We look at some products and you can see sort of their brain working a little bit. And at some point they like light up a bit and go, okay. And that's a nice experience. I think the people who came to our studio now, they are already to some degree interested
Mhm.
in this type of work. So they are not completely new. They don't have to be won over completely in the sense of trying to show them why this type of message might be relevant for their day-to-day function. Yeah, when you have a walk-in event, like a showroom or something, then you get these people who really have no idea. They just walk in, and then I think the visit might have even a bigger impact, because then they go from not thinking about it at all to having a sort of aha moment.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Your pieces, they tell a story. They tell a story of sustainability. They tell a story of making this garment. And so, why do you think storytelling is so important when it comes to sustainability?
I think storytelling is, you could say, important in, that's what fashion is built on, I would say, because even if you don't have a clear narrative, you create sort of associations that create emotions. And these emotions, like, that's what actually makes the people want to have the piece or be interested in the piece. Sustainable products, because they are made under different production practices or design practices, they sometimes have a bit more of a hard time reaching the customer, because they can be a bit less exciting, or they can be a bit less like trend driven. And then the narrative sort of balances what sometimes they lack in fashionability. I hope that's not the case for our items. I think actually we try to bring those two things together to have interesting design pieces that are striking, even just from an aesthetic perspective, plus have them under sustainable aspects. But yeah, I think just generally in the sustainable product world, they sometimes have a bit of a hard time.
Mm-hmm. I took a look at your website. I wanted to visualize while I was speaking with you. But I see you have a Shein zip up. Can you explain this? I love this.
Yes, we have two lines. We have one, just our human touch line. That's where we cut and sew all the pieces from the beginning to the end in our studio. And then we have a upcycling line, for which we source vintage and secondhand pieces and then do the paint sewing on top of them. We're like a decorative stitch. And so when we were sourcing these secondhand and vintage pieces, we came across this tiny, very trendy little cardigan from Shein. These Shein pieces, they are also made by human beings. So the majority of these pieces also have these invisible fingerprints on them. And so we, took this Shein piece, did the paint sewing on top of it, and fully overpriced it. I don't remember exactly how much it is, but it's like over 800 euro, which I'm not expecting anybody to go ahead and buy that. But yeah, we're just having a bit of a fun moment putting that on our website.
I am obsessed. I think that is so powerful. I have very personal beef with Ian. They did a partnership with my college while I was there. And my college, I had like literally learned about sustainable fashion by visiting my college. And we like always had sustainability classes and were preached that we were like the future of the industry. And then they partnered with Shein, and I was like, oh, heck no. What are we doing? So I did a petition against it that got a good amount of coverage at the time. And so Shein and we beef.
It's, I have that experience quite often, like that you, on the one hand, sustainability is supported and championed by certain industry players, and then suddenly there's like this massive H&M Times Square event where a ton of people go to and a ton of like influential people go to. And it's difficult to not think it's a bit hypocritical.
Yes. No, completely. Every year during Coachella in California, and like every influencer ever goes to this like festival, and I'm like, oh guys, no, can we have a sustainable fest at the same time?
Yeah, it would be such a good opportunity.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe
If
I'll do
you're channeling,
it.
if you're already channeling a bit of the hippie boho chic,
Right?
you might as well transfer that to, a bit of more high quality content, but
Agreed. Agreed. So after opening your studio and welcoming people in and hearing your process, what's one thing that you wish more fashion brands would do maybe differently in general or different during Fashion Week?
it's what's a bit tricky about that question is because the fashion weeks are so different and the type of
Mhm.
brands are so different. And so, for example, when you look at the brands that are on the Berlin calendar, there are a lot of younger brands
Mm,
and only been around for a few years that even just by nature of not having super large quantities and by nature of being super close to the creative process still
yeah.
are more sustainable. Even if they don't market that, they still are more sustainable than other sort of corporate sponsored large events that, which I guess you also partly have in Berlin, but maybe more in other fashion weeks.
Yeah.
As a consumer, I love seeing behind the scenes, and I love it when brands put out like work in progress videos or like actually show how a specific artisanal technique that they're using came to be, or sharing some pictures of their atelier on their website or as an event. I personally find that super interesting, and I think it would help people, like rather than it being a black box of fashion that is just where you see just only the end product. If you get to see behind how these items are made, I think people would actually like literally buy into those
Mhm.
products more.
Yeah, no, completely. I think we need to talk more about these pieces are being made by hand. Like we need to bring that more to the forefront because again, as I was saying, like I think so many people think that these are made by machines when they're not, whether you're buying from a fast fashion company or a small business. And I think it's important to call that out. But I want to go to a Berlin Fashion Week or like a Copenhagen Fashion Week so bad because
Right.
in New York at New York Fashion Week, I'll go down the list of all the designers and it's like maybe two of them are like focused on sustainability and I'm like, no. During these big weeks or during even just like it's award season right now with the Oscars and Grammys and all
Mm.
that jazz and I'm like, these are huge events that are taking place and oftentimes they get asked the question, who are you wearing or whatever. And so I'm like, if we're already talking about fashion and what's happening at the Grammys and who won what and outfit
Mhm.
changes and performances and whatever, like these are great opportunities to be talking about sustainability. And I just wish that we were seeing more of it. I do think it's even just encouraging when I think like last year, Billie Eilish wore a pair of like thrifted shoes. And I was
Mm.
like, see, it's the tiniest thing, like a pair of
So
thrifted
simple.
shoes, but it has such an impact where I'm like,
Yeah.
everything was like, Billie Eilish wears thrifted shoes to the Grammys. We can be doing more of that. I think it's so important.
Yeah. I think sustainability in fashion or in general,
Mm.
some it can be a bit of a downer in
Yeah.
because it often because of what it is, it can have an accusatory aspect. It can have a sort of a bit of a heavy aspect, like you have to think about what you wear. And I think sometimes when people consume fashion, like either buying it or like looking at the outfits online and stuff, sometimes they also just want to be either entertained or
Mhm.
taken to a different, lighter space. So that's also something we try to do with human touch, even though a component of it can be very heavy and weighing down because of the severity of the working conditions in some parts of the world. But we also want to emphasize that making something by hand can be something very beautiful and fascinating and interesting. And so I think with these narratives around sustainable fashion, it's important to also make them fun and or even sexy or like that, what people desire when they want to dress themselves up. It's not always wanting to be on the moral high ground, also just feeling cool or whatever.
Yeah. And that's where we go back to the storytelling bit of it all, where it's like, how do we get this across in a fun way? I was just having a conversation with someone where I was like, I feel like the second you say like vegan or vegetarian, people get so turned off. And I understand that there are like people out there that are like super extreme and out there guilting people for
Mm.
their habits and things like that. And I honestly think that was part of my sustainable journey is like not guilting people for it. And I just find it so interesting of like, how do I get this across where I'm having this conversation, but I meet them where they're at, meet them at their interests, and then like slickly slide in. Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's sustainable and ethical. Like I have it now where all of my friends, when they thrift something, they're like, thanks, I thrifted it. And I'm like, oh, good. I like
Yeah.
they know that they're gonna be encouraged by me because I love when they thrift something.
Yeah.
Let's make it positive. Let's make it cool. Let's make it sexy. Like I am right there with you. This has been amazing. I always like to end my podcast on what are some top tips for someone who is starting their journey to a more sustainable lifestyle.
So something I like to do, and I have to say I'm not a minimalist in my of shopping and whatever consuming. So what I like to do is think twice about what I buy, meaning you if you want to buy it and you're not entirely sure from the get-go, go away, think about it, and if you're still thinking about it, you can go back and get it. And I bet 80% of the time you will have forgotten about the product by the time you're around the block. And that's something that works really well for me when I'm like not super certain. So yeah, and also pretty easy because if you do continue thinking about it, you can go and treat yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so smart. I think we are doing things way too fast. And if we just slowed down
Mhm.
for literally half a second, we would be making a lot less of the purchases that we make.
Yeah, exactly.
Where can people find you on social media or anywhere else?
So we are on Instagram at the human touch underscore clothing. And then we're on TikTok. I believe it's just human touch clothing. I don't frequent TikTok that often, I have to say. And then we have our website, humantouchclothing.com, where we also have our web shop. And our next upcycling line drop is coming next week. Yeah, you can go over there, have a look.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. You do amazing work. It's so cool to see. That's it for this week's episode of the Lexy Show Fashion That Gives a Damn. Big thanks to Juliet. Whether it's fashion or everyday products, this is how sustainability should work. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Head to LexySilverstein.com for more content on sustainable style and conscious consumption. And follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lexy Silverstein. That's Lexy, silver like the color Stein. Remember to live a good life and look fucking good doing it and demand better from the brands in your closet and everywhere else. See you next week.